Okay, I wanted to go over a little bit more about evaluating sources and different types of sources with you, just in case you're not 100% sure about what each of these types of sources means. So I wanted to start by talking about primary sources. So primary sources provide original information. They're usually scholarly journals. By providing original information, I mean they were written by the person who did the original research, and then that person writes about their findings in a researched paper. Another type of primary source is a source like an autobiography, someone who's writing about themselves, first person, or a person who is a first-hand witness to an event, someone living at a certain time period and talking about what was occurring, what they saw occurring. Those are primary sources, and those are first-hand accounts of original information. Primary sources can be peer-reviewed scholarly. They don't always have to be peer-reviewed scholarly. They can be other types of essays, narratives, articles, books, like I said, autobiographies, historical writings, and things like that. The next type of source is a secondary source. And a secondary source is often where a writer is quoting or summarizing information from the primary source. So when you are writing your researched papers right now, you are writing secondary sources. You are using, or I should say, secondary papers, because you are using quotes from primary sources. You're using evidence from primary outside sources such as researched papers. They are also articles that come from newspapers and periodicals, things like Time, Newsweek, and Scientific American, where these authors are writing about topics but using other evidence, other information, a lot of them that are coming from primary sources. Okay, so here are just a few short videos that go over how to identify scholarly journal articles versus other types of news articles. Okay, so I hope that helped you to understand a little bit more about the difference between scholarly journal articles and substantive news articles. Again, a scholarly journal is written by experts in the field. You should always see the author's name, and they often have a place in the article at the very end or the beginning where they tell you the author's credentials and affiliations. This is not always 100% given, but a lot of the time. Articles are peer-reviewed by other professionals in the field, which means that these peers have gone through it and checked for certain standards and requirements before being allowed to publish in the journal. And they often contain original research. They almost always contain bibliographic citations or footnoted to document research. The bibliographic citations is the reference, or what you call an APA, the reference page. You usually can find them in certain databases, and most found on the internet are fee-based, meaning if you find them online, when you go to the article itself, it's going to bring you to the journal it came from, and it's going to tell you that you need to pay in order to get that article. So where do you go? You go to the University of Phoenix library databases. And in this case, you can find thousands of articles and references to articles, to peer-reviewed scholarly articles that you cannot find on the general web. And that is one of the benefits of using the University of Phoenix library, because the University of Phoenix pays thousands of dollars to buy subscriptions to these databases for you, the student. So EBSCOhost is my favorite. ProQuest is another similar one to EBSCOhost, Opposing Viewpoints, and there are some other general databases, as well as specific databases for subject-specific or discipline-specific information. Substantive magazines, as you saw in the video, are not all considered, well, they're not scholarly and they're not all the same value. So you really need to make sure you're looking for ones that are considered very credible, that you've heard about, and that have much longer, more in-depth articles, and they need to have the name of the author. If you find information with no author provided, including the educational institution or organization that produced this writing, then you should avoid that source. The purpose of substantive magazines is to provide information in a more general manner to a broader audience of readers than a scholarly journal that was written for specific experts within that field. News magazines are also often credible and have good information like Time, Newsweek, US News and World Report. They're reputable. They report on current events. They're not as in-depth, but they could be a good introduction and an overview to the research topic. They use general layman's language. They're geared for, again, this general audience of readers and not experts in the field. Popular magazines, these types of magazines, they're recreational reading. They usually just skim the surface of information. They don't provide in-depth information. They don't provide outside research. They don't list their sources, and they often don't even have an author, and you need to stay away from this type of information. So when you're doing any kind of evaluation, and I covered this in the library research page, you need to look at these criteria in order to establish credibility of the source and the author. So you want to look at the title and the description to determine if it's relevant to your topic. Looking at the abstract will also tell you if it is something that is going to answer your research question. The date for currency, because again, if you are looking at medicine or science or any kind of technology, things change so quickly. You need to make sure you're finding the most current research and information. The name of the periodical itself, that is the container. That is where the article is published. How scholarly is it? Is it a peer-reviewed scholarly journal or just an academic journal or a scholarly journal that has not been peer-reviewed? You need to be able to distinguish that, and you can click on the database boxes so that only peer-reviewed journals will come up. Who is the author? What is his or her credentials? What are their experience, their expertise, their education, background, and things like that? We call that the authority of the author, and it is important to establish author authority as well as credibility of the content of the information as well. Accuracy, is the information able to be corroborated? Meaning, can you look up other research, other articles, look at other information and find similar information, similar things being written about, similar findings, similar conclusions. If you find something and it is the only source that contains that information, nothing else you can find will back that up. Again, stay away from that source. It's probably not as reliable and credible. And then the length. Does it have scope and depth? Scope means how much information of a topic does it cover, and depth is how deep does it go into a very specific focus topic. If you're looking at books, and the library at University of Phoenix has many ebooks, you might find some information. Look at the table of contents. Skim the author's preface to make sure you understand the position the author is taking. Use the index to look up a few words that are related to your topic. Look at individual chapters. The book itself might have a lot of different information on a topic, but one of the chapters might be something that can help you in your own research. Consider the author's style and approach. Is it specialized or general? And does the other author present ideas in an unbiased way? And then web sources. You might find relevant or beneficial information on the web if you are looking in the right place. But again, you have to be very careful and you have to evaluate the source very carefully. And so here is the criteria for doing that. Again, looking at the title, how relevant is it to your topic and your research questions? Is there an author? What are his or her qualifications? If there is no author and you do not know who has written this web page or this article on a web page, you need to stay away from that source. The date, it needs to have a date. You cannot use a source that doesn't have a date. If you look at a website, scroll down to the bottom of the website and make sure the copyright is current and that that website is being updated, and then you know that it is credible, or at least that is one of the criteria, that it is being kept up and current. Look at the site sponsor or the purpose. Who is the general web designer, the purpose who, or the organization or purpose who's creating this website? Is it meant for informational purposes? Is it an educational website or a government website, or is it a website that possibly could be masquerading for marketing to sell you something, or have very specific and biased information on it? You have to be aware of that. And finally, the URL, the domain name. Make sure it is reliable. .govs and .edus are more reliable websites. .coms can be made for anybody. .nets can be made, or I should say, from anybody. Anybody can make a .com or a .net. So you want to go to .gov, .edu, .mil. Those are much more reliable websites, web pages, but you still need to make sure to evaluate and use the criteria. Looking at why the site was created, again, what is the purpose? Are they trying to argue a position, provide information, or sell you a product? And if they're selling you a product, there's going to be a lot of biased advertisements, and it's probably not a good website to go to. And who is the site's intended audience? You have to really be aware of this because, for example, if you are looking up information about guns and you go to the NRA website, that website is going to be delivering information in a specific way to a specific audience, an audience of people who have a certain position about guns. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to be aware when you are going to that website what their position is and who their audience is. Is it a general website that is intended for anybody? Is it a website that's intended for a certain group of people, a certain gender, age, socioeconomic? Because the way they're writing and the information they're providing you is going to be different depending on the intended audience. So for further information, you can go to the Center for Writing Excellence. My dogs are going crazy in the background right now. And the library. You can also visit the Olin and Uris libraries for critically analyzing information sources. This is a really good website. Or the OWL at Purdue, and look for evaluating websites. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always reach out to me.